Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with the Average Joe Sports Show. Recruiting talk here on the way.
And we'll talk about the real black shirts, Colorado and Nebraska.
Hi, everybody. It's Bill Doleman. The Nebraska baseball team avoids midweek follies. They're carrying some momentum into Michigan State.
It's Elijah Herbel here. We also have some preseason win totals from Circus Sports for Big Ten schools. We'll get into those. Where does Nebraska rank?
Welcome to it, episode 42 of the Average Joe Sports Show podcast. Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel. It's Chris Schmidt. A little heart-shaped love there by one Gary Sharp. Find and like us on all the socials and on YouTube. The Average Joe Sports Show podcast. The AJ Sports Pod is where you find us on Twitter. And what is the email, fellas? Is it if you want to be a friend of the Average Joes, if you want to be a Joey and help us help you in the business world, it's what?
The AJ Sports Show at gmail.com. The AJ Sports Show. You have the double S with sports and shows, so watch out for that. AJ Sports Show at gmail.com.
There we have it. Elijah Herbel with the save. How's the week been? Doleman, are you ready to frighten students Bob Knight style?
Tis finals week and the final go round for grades. So it's like being an accountant at tax time, so it's a little on the stressful side. Now I already have my degree, so I'm not as stressed out. It's just a matter of getting through everybody's stuff.
I thought there was a high probability of Grandma Schmidt being in Devaney Center and that look of shame and disappointment in her eyes if I would not have walked. I could have faked it and never showed him the degree, but I got my undergraduate degree. It was Spanish 201 after a 4-year hiatus from high school, and somehow I teamed up with the right partners.
Yep. I probably have a couple of Blutarskis. I might be grading their stuff in a few years.
Future senator.
Yeah.
Did you ever get that show in high school when we had our graduation ceremony? They did not give you your degree. They gave you the folder, but they didn't give you your degree. And so they didn't tell anybody. So everybody's getting back to their seat and they're opening it up and it's not there. And they're like, oh my God, what did I do?
It's a giant middle finger, right?
how many books didn't I return? I thought I had all the grades and all that kind of stuff. And so then they mailed it to you. But that was, I was like, oh man, my parents are going to kill me.
No, for us over at Lincoln Southeast, it was the same way, but they told us beforehand, like, hey, you're going to get the little booklet. It's going to be empty inside. Don't worry, we're going to mail it to you. It's just our way to keep you from misbehaving at graduation. So if we have any issues, you won't get your degree. That's why we give you the book. I think now, in hindsight, it's probably just easier for the shipment people to be able to make it and put it into a folder with a mailing address on it instead of trying to organize everything. Have you seen the amount of work that goes into getting all the right diplomas into the right booklets at UNL? NET did a little mini story on it about just all the work it takes, like a month of getting all these diplomas in order and matching up the booklets with everything and making sure there's no typos. So I think it's just probably the public school system's way of being like, all right, we're going to make it, and then we're just going to go directly into a mailing folder, and it's all computerized. We don't have to do anything with that anymore.
That's a win. Remember my senior year graduation party? It was awesome. And mom and dad had everybody in the garage, and my dad's buddies, they were playing basketball. When we had moved into this new neighborhood, we actually had a driveway that we could put a basketball hoop up. So they're shooting hoops, and none of them were their BAC was probably hovering around that 0.8 number. A lot of John Daniels that evening, and they're playing 21. My dad's old buddies, and none of them can shoot. It's like they're blindfolded with a cigarette. Some of them were smoking when they were playing hoops, but one guy missed a shot so bad it hit off the rim, and then jacked my dad's new convertible. And like he heard, and my dad turned and looked away from the grill. They all scattered. They all scattered like they were teenagers caught teepeeing. And some of them have never moved so fast in their life, but that's my graduation memory. It's not the cap, the gown, Pershing auditorium, the eye contact, and hey, you're the principal. Nice to see you. Never saw you in my life. It was all of his old buddies running and hiding once they put what we thought was a dent into his Camaro. No dent. It worked out okay.
Well, the only thing I remember about graduation at UNL was I had just done my first broadcast, Nebraska Baseball, in April, and they asked me to do the Nebraska State High School Soccer Championships. And in 1989, nobody knew anything about soccer, and I certainly didn't. So I had purchased a Soccer Rules coloring book, the 1976 New York Cosmos highlight video VHS with
Pele,
Mueller, and Pele. And I got a soccer rule book, and I took the soccer rule book to my college commencement, stuck it under my gown, and while Clayton Yiter, whoever it was delivering the commencement speech, I was reading soccer rules so I could get ready for the broadcast the following weekend. And that's what I got out of my college commencement.
It's all good. Well, hard work. That's the commencement theme a lot of times. And let's transition to recruiting, fellas. Sharpie, you got to be pretty thrilled about Nebraska on the recruiting trail. They've obviously used the spring game, but they're using this time here for official visits, hoping to get guys back on their own dime during the season. But you land your 2025 quarterback. I know you're pretty high on TJ Lateef. Also, a thought, guys, as we talk David Sanders, the number one offensive tackle of the country. Pretty big time for Nebraska to get in the mix and at least make him think about it.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? Usually a guy like Lateef that commits to Nebraska, first of all, comes from California, 4-star. If you watch his film, he can make all the throws. That people would be a little bit more excited about a 4-star, getting a 4-star quarterback of his ability. It seems to be a little bit muted, and I'm sure that's the Raiola effect. But I've said this since they were in the mix for him. It's a hell of a sales job because, they finally got that position right, and they finally got the right coach to develop and an eye for exactly what he wants, and they're recruiting to that. But to be able to sell a highly coveted prospect, hey, we got a pretty good quarterback room. We'd like you to join. And that quarterback says, yeah, no problem. I see your guy. You might have a 3-year starter. I'm okay with that. That's a great sales job. And I think that's how it has to happen. They just have to keep turning it over. And there's going to be attrition at quarterback. I mean, we just don't know who it's going to be. But, man, accumulate as many quarterbacks as you can and then see how long you can keep them. Ohio State didn't lose any of their quarterbacks. That says a lot about their culture, also about their room and their coaching in there. And I think that's a good sign for Nebraska. But it just seems kind of muted. And I'm excited about it. But I think I'd be even more excited if a David Sanders or Scholl, who's the big 4-star offensive lineman from Oklahoma, if they were the next to say it. But the one thing that we keep coming back to is Nebraska does a good job of selling exactly what their plan is. And once you get somebody on campus, well, you change things. Dawson Merritt is a linebacker who has come down between Alabama and Nebraska. And he's a Kansas City guy. Nebraska got him on campus, and all of a sudden that official visit changed how he was looking at Nebraska, that they have a legitimate chance against Alabama. And the same thing with Sanders. They got him on campus, and he said, man, there's something going on here. So good to the staff and their plan and their organization as a recruiting arm of selling Nebraska football.
It's interesting what the Raiola effect has had now on 2 cycles. Because you go back to remember the big weekend that last, March of 23, when all of those big recruits came in. They went to the Nebraska baseball game, and Dylan was here, and they brought in the big offensive lineman who eventually went to Texas. But the impact was Dylan Raiola is making a visit to Nebraska, and that attracted a lot more. Now, not everybody came here. Raiola eventually does show up here, but now you're seeing that again, that Raiola did sign, and he is here, and the adulation and whatever the NIL dollars are. But the Raiola effect is having another effect 2 years in a row that a guy like Sanders or Terry or some of these other players, Latif even, I think it's a big deal that kid has had an impact in terms of just attracting players to go, well, if he did it, then I'm going to take a look too. And who knows how long that's going to last. That could go into another year.
Well, it's something we've heard across multiple coaching staffs that one of the big pieces of a recruitment for Nebraska is just getting kids on campus. Yeah. Getting kids to Lincoln and showing them, hey, it's not all cornfields and cows. There's a nice little city in Lincoln here in the heart of the prairie. And we have a very, very passionate football family that will take care of you. That's both in-house and the fans outside. Like once you get in Lincoln and see what we have to offer, it's going to change the complexion of any recruitment. And that's what we've heard from multiple coaching staffs, at least Riley and Frost. And you guys have to tell me, did you hear this from Bo as well? Probably, even if he didn't say it out loud, it's always been a factor in Nebraska is that getting kids on campus is going to be one of the biggest pieces of the sell job of selling what Nebraska is and anything else. You can talk to them on the phone and say, hey, Nebraska's different, but they don't get it until they come out here.
One thing, you've had different outlooks in the recruiting world with different staffs, and Riley did a hell of a job of bringing high-level dudes here. I mean, Parsons, Buki, I mean, go down the 5-star list, but could you get one of them to pull the trigger? And you finished second a lot. Didn't help you. Bo kind of thought, I'm going to get who I can get. And a lot of his 3-stars turned out to be longtime NFL guys. So his recruiting ranking didn't accurately, in my opinion, reflect just the talent they brought in and developed, especially in that wide receiver room too. I mean, think of the backs and the wideouts that he had that he brought in on top of, some of the front sevens and the offensive line. And then there's Rule, who says, yeah, we're going to bring in who we like. We're going to bring in what our eyes tell us. We're going to bring in what we think their character is, whether they're, a Hassan Reddick 2-star clone or they're a 5-star offensive tackle that the world wants. So Rule's the best of both worlds right now. They just got to turn and do it on the field.
Yeah, one quick thing here. I think mentioning coaches before, like Bill Callahan could recruit. I mean, there was a ton of talent. He didn't have the staff to do what you needed to do with that talent. And then you go through the different coaches who've all had their bouts of success with recruiting, some better than others. You're right, Schmidt. Like Mike Riley got in on a lot of guys. Of course, he had Nebraska, but he also finished runner-up. I think Rule's approach is a little bit different. I think Frost had to do this when he first got here. I don't think he had a very good staff to recruit. Travis Fisher was a good recruiter, but they could sell him to come to Lincoln. But once they got to Lincoln, it seemed like it was a hodgepodge if they were going to stay or not. I think one thing I like about Rule, and this, when you're 5-7 and you're relatively new, you got to recruit to the university. And that's been a interesting approach, and I think that is effective, is they're selling Nebraska, they're not selling Matt Rule. Now, Rule comes along with Nebraska, but they're selling Nebraska first instead of some of these previous coaches where they've sold, hey, come play for Coach Bo, come play for Scott, come play for Callahan, those kind of things. They're selling the university. And I think that's resonating a lot right now.
And I agree that with Gary, Matt Rule, they got it right there. Glenn Thomas, they've got it right. Satterfield's probably in a comfortable position where he is. But I'm going back to Raiola too. Those coaches can say all the right things and get them here, but those guys are going into DMs and they're texting and they're saying, all right, Dylan, is it really what they're telling me? And Raiola can say, absolutely it is. And it also is, it's a 5-star quarterback. It's not a 5-star offensive lineman that is the crown jewel get for Matt Rule. It's not a great running back. It is the QB. And, there's just something about, look, I am not a fan of recruiting. You all know that by now. but the fact that kid is at that position with all the notoriety he got for so many years that, they can hear all the pitches they want from the coaching staff, but if one text says it's legit, that's a good enough for a kid to get here, and then the sale job is on.
Yep.
Guys, let's go from recruiting to showcasing. Hopefully you're enjoying the Average Joe Sports Show YouTube channel. The Average Joe Sports Show, can like and subscribe there. The AJ Sports Pod. And one more time, Elijah, the AJ Sports Show at gmail.com. If you want to be a friend of the Average Joes and have us chat about your wonderful business, you're welcome to do that. That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. So putting it on the field, right? They talk about putting it on the grass. That is a Mr. Tony special. Nebraska is going to have a chance to do that and then some. Nebraska fans' prayers answered. It is Prime. It is Boulder. It is Colorado. It's all them Buffaloes, probably the most hated, along with Texas and Miami. We'll talk about ranking who's most hated. Colorado coming to town September 7th, night game, NBC. Give me a hoo-ah. I mean, that's going to be incredible. It's going to be fun. It's going to be drunk. It's going to be all sorts of crazy. And Nebraska fans can't wait.
Hey, isn't this great that there is going to be so much hype for two teams that combined to win 9 games last year?
Right on. But I mean, it's a helmet, man. It's a helmet rivalry. It makes everyone smile who grew up with this stuff.
Yeah, you know what? And I mean, it also shows you how great college football is. The atmosphere is everything. Like, you look at the games that rolled out, and I mean, we're all in heaven this week because we got NFL schedule release. We got college football kickoff times. I mean, we're on overload in the middle of May, but it shows you that college football is built around great atmospheres. They say Nebraska-Colorado, you're going to play prime time. And people probably went, who cares? They won 9 games. And we're like, no, wait till you see this atmosphere. It's going to be absolutely insane. And that's what makes college football so great. I don't know that you could prepare yourself if you've never been a Colorado player in the environment that you're about to experience.
It's fair.
Because it's an environment that not only is a night game at Memorial Stadium where there's a lot of hope. Okay. And then there's also the fact that people don't like you. And you can say, hey, we play the villain well. I don't know if Colorado's ready for that smoke, because it'll be a different kind of smoke. It'll be anger. Like, it'll be personal. Like, you did dirty to us. It's not just you guys. It's past Colorado players and coaches that we hate. And so we're coming to get you. And it's great. That's what makes college football. It's going to be fantastic. I mean, both teams could be, one team could be 0-1, one could be 1-0, and it won't change at 6:30 on September 7th what that's going to be like in the stadium.
But think back to last year. You said it's not just you. It's the previous college. I mean, it's a lot of what these guys currently on roster and currently on staff did last year too. I mean, walking out of that stadium in Boulder last year, Schmitty, I don't think there was more anger about a loss than the loss in Boulder. There was disappointment after Michigan, frustration.
You and I have had a lot of experiences.
There was frustration throughout the month of November. There wasn't anger like we saw. I mean, there wasn't violence.
Nebraska fans were ready to jump in front of traffic,
yes.
in front of Folsom, because Lucy pulled the football again. That's how they felt, and then they got drilled. And then they had it rubbed in their face.
And then what do? You check the social media afterwards, and Colorado's pulling this disrespect card. Let's not forget that. That was I won't say a big talking point on our post-game show, but it was a talking point. The way that Coach Prime and Shedeur, they pulled the disrespect card. Matt Rule's disrespecting us all offseason.
Especially Shedeur up at the podium. Yeah.
And then you have the Shedeur pointing at the watch thing at midfield because Nebraska was disrespecting. That left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. It's a bad taste that persists. And we've seen it this offseason. Husker fans are ready for anything to go wrong with Coach Prime so they can hop on Twitter and put a little tweet saying how bad Coach Prime is at Colorado, how awful the Sanders family is. And I'm being a little bit dramatic here, but it's true. You talk to Husker fans, there is more anger directed at that program, not just because of the history, but also because of what happened last year than anyone else in the schedule this year. And you've already laid it out. It's a night game. There's going to be venom in the water, and we'll see how Colorado responds. That's going to be a tough road environment for them. And let's be clear, North Dakota State, we've talked about them. That's their week 1 matchup. That's a tough matchup for them. But then week 2, on the road, Nebraska, that's going to be the toughest road environment they play in all year long. And the question to me is, do they have confidence coming out of that North Dakota State game, or do they have self-doubt?
I think they have bruised ribs. I think the old North Dakota boys going to put a bar fight thrashing on them, and they may survive. They may not, but then you got to come to Lincoln. There's a long memory, fellas, and I'll shut up, with Nebraska fans going out to Boulder. Nebraska fans aren't going to go tit for tat with slashed tires or broken windshields. They just don't do that. But it's been 3 straight you've lost to them, going back with the home and homes. So it's absolute payback, what Nebraska fans feeling with this. And it's a statement opportunity. Rule was talking about it this week on his radio show, and also with his couple of podcasts he did with the showcase. Hey, show what you've done as a team, as an individual, from the work to get better and go win a game of this magnitude. He's right about that.
I think Nebraska is going to have to temper their enthusiasm for the game. And we'll probably get it, if we die, we die 2.0. I still think that this is one of those measured weeks of practice where they really downplay the hype the best they possibly can, because everything around Nebraska, from Scotts Bluff to Falls City,
on fire,
to Valentine, there is going to be, the fire line, right? People are going to put around the border. But I think, Matt Rule's approach that week is probably going to be one of subdued, game at a time, coach speak, and then after the game, they'll unleash the William Wallace speech, right? But we won't know that until afterward. But I think they're going to play this as Osborne-esque as they possibly can, and let whatever happens in the game. I don't think that there's going to be a USC 90-yard drive to open up the game. That place is going to be juiced. And look, my favorite game of all time at Memorial Stadium is Halloween night, 1992, Nebraska-Colorado, 52-7. And the picture of the guy with the Jason mask on and all of that. It was dreary, drizzle, rain, cold, and it was just glorious. This won't have probably that kind of dreariness to it, but I really think Nebraska is going to unleash that on the field, and I think it could affect Colorado for the whole season if it goes 52-7 again. I think that's possible.
See, so I think a couple of things. We see FCS versus FBS matchups that go the way of like a North Dakota State beating Iowa when the FBS team doesn't have a very good offense. So I would caution people. I don't know who at North Dakota State is going to be able to cover Travis Hunter or Jimmy Horn. I think Colorado will be good at the beginning of the year. I think whatever happens in this game, Nebraska has to score 4 touchdowns to win. But there's something that has been brought up that, we all want to lean into the Colorado game, and you really don't really have to say anything. But Matt Rule would like to go all in on Colorado, but I'm glad that he is very cognizant of one important factor in the 2024 season. Won't it be nice, guys, for the first time in basically 5 years to start a season with some normalcy? Mm-hmm. Nebraska has not started 1-0 since 2019. They've played 4 straight years where they have been on the road, and they've started with a conference game. And last year they started with 2 games on the road. It'll be nice to have normalcy, but I think we also, before we go all in on Colorado, you have to pause and go, man, it'd be nice for the first time since 2019 for Nebraska to be 1-0. And then we can address what happened in 2019 when I think that staff made a huge mistake on how they treated the Colorado game. They looked at that game and said, you know what, that's going to be a home game for us. It's going to be in Boulder. That'll be game 2 of our second year. And you know what? That's the game that's going to show everybody that we're back, that Nebraska is here. We're going to be the better team. And look what happened. They completely fell apart after going up. And that game had an effect on them the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. I think this staff is too mature and this team is too mature to go all in on one game. But if you're 1-0, you don't have to say anything when you walk off the field if you're 1-0 against UTEP, because all you got to say is it's Colorado week, and then just let it go, like you were alluding to, Bill. That's what will make this a very interesting dynamic, is how much noise comes out from both sides of the border surrounding this game, especially if both teams are 1-0.
I don't anticipate a lot of Buff fans making the trip east.
You don't?
I think it'll be one of the most difficult tickets for an outsider to get. Now, when Oregon came here in 16? That was the most amount of non-conference visiting fans that I've ever seen in Lincoln. Oregon fans were everywhere. They wanted to experience Memorial Stadium. I think in this case, it will not be easy to get a ticket, even if you're a Nebraska fan or a Colorado fan, because I think most people will hold on to their tickets. It will be, I'll make a prediction here, it'll be the largest crowd ever at Memorial Stadium, and it'll be the most difficult ticket to get at Memorial Stadium.
I think that's fair.
There's been some. I mean, think of the buzz for SC that is the 07, right? With the hype and the moment, the opportunity we put on that. You had Texas. Ricky Williams was pretty big.
Well, let's go back. Let's even closer. Yeah. Is that 21 Michigan game?
Yeah,
it's going to have the same vibe of, oh man, Nebraska's got a big game. It's a night game. You could feel it in Lincoln. People were ready to pop. And then, how that game turned out, and Nebraska came up on the wrong end of the ledger. It kind of feels that way. But I remember that there were a lot of my friends who are season ticket holders that were not selling their tickets. They were not going to get rid of their tickets. They were going to that game. They were not going to go and tailgate and stay in the parking lot. They were coming into the stadium, and I think you'll see the same thing on September 7th.
Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, The Average Joe Sports Show, episode 42. You can find and like us on YouTube, The Average Joe Sports Show. Like and subscribe, the AJ Sports Pod. Follow and find on Twitter and the AJ Sports Show at gmail.com if you want to be a friend of The Average Joe Sports Show from an advertising standpoint. Guys, we've hit a lot of football. Let's get to some of the circa numbers released. And you have Oregon and Ohio State at 10.5. The win total, the over-under. You've got Michigan at 9.5. I think that's real high. That 9.5 number is there. Washington is at 7. Nebraska comes in at 7.5. And who else am I missing? I'll pull that up here in a second. But it's pretty interesting to see just the rundown of the Big Ten teams, where it looks like Ohio State and Oregon are your playoff favorites in the league. Penn State is right up there too with a 9.5 win total. But how does 7.5 grab you for Nebraska? I'm buying over, man. I know it's May 15th, but I'm buying over right now. Maybe it's a Colorado announcement this week. I don't know, but 7.5, I think 7-5 could be a fair floor. But I just think if they stay healthy and things go right, I do like the schedule to do better than that 7.5. Talk me out of burning money. Somebody jump in.
Well, there's a lot of talk about, at the end of last season that, UCLA is coming in and that things are going to change. I'm thinking there was talk about firing Chip Kelly in the middle of last year, and then he grabs the parachute and jumps. So I still am kind of disillusioned about what people see in UCLA going to the Big Ten and going to immediately acclimate the way they've kind of said Oregon is going to. I think the jury's still out a little bit on USC. I mean, their defense was atrocious last year. Presumably, they've made an upgrade with their defensive coordinator. So, okay, yeah, USC might be pretty good. The heir apparent to Caleb Williams is in Boise. So there's some restructuring going on with USC and certainly with UCLA, right? So I'm not quite sure where, Nebraska is going to be, potentially unbeaten through its first 6 games and then completely fall off. If Nebraska is rolling through that home portion of the schedule and they've got Indiana with a new coach, You've got Rutgers, who was better last year. Sure, Ohio State's going to be tough. Wisconsin is in Lincoln. That was a close ball game last year. So Nebraska's got a very favorable early schedule with the games at home, right? And they can't have a letdown if there's a win over Colorado. They can't go to Ames, Iowa, and lose to Marv Seiler in a 50-mile-an-hour north wind, wearing all white.
Good old Marv.
History cannot repeat itself in that regard, right? So if you roll through and you've got momentum going into that second half of the season, I don't see where every game at the end is completely unwinnable. Maybe at Ohio State, okay, that might be the tough test, right? But UCLA and Rutgers and Indiana and Wisconsin, and you go on the road to play, Iowa, but I think there's a lot of winnable games in the second half.
Okay, I'm gonna throw some caution at you. Well, you mentioned Ohio State. One thing I'll say, if you want to have the glass half full of Kool-Aid, Nebraska could be the trap game depending on how Nebraska's season's going for Ohio State, because Nebraska's in the middle of Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State. Nebraska's game 2 in that series for Ohio State. There's a bye week in there. But you talk about, okay, maybe trap game potential. There's your optimism. The pessimism side of me says, for me, this early to chalk up Nebraska in pencil as a win on anything is, I think Nebraska needs to be better at all three phases of the game: offense, defense, special teams. There's a lot of question marks offensively with a freshman quarterback. I'll say it. I think I'm high on Dylan Raiola. I think he's going to be better than your average freshman. He's still going to be a freshman. He's still going to make freshman mistakes. Let's throw it out there. I mean, you saw one of those in the spring game in the red zone, throwing behind a receiver. Is it a mental freshman mistake that you expect? No.
Damn him.
It's still
as soon as possible.
It's still a mistake to make in the red zone whenever you have a chance at getting points. And there's my secondary point. In the red zone, if you're 3rd and 6, you can't chalk up 3 points on the board if you don't pick up that third down right now with what I see in Nebraska's field goal kicking room with Albano. Albano's had some issues. You have Buschini. Buschini's good for a couple of good punts a game, and he's good for one bad punt a game. A kickoff return-wise, I know Barney had that one return in the spring game. I'm still not ready to anoint him as being the guy returning kicks or returning punts. There's issues in that special teams side of things that I think could come back to bite Nebraska in the Big Ten. There's your pessimist side of things. I'm not ready to say Nebraska in 8 games next season is better in all 3 phases. Nebraska can win football games not being better in all 3 phases. We haven't even talked about turnovers yet. But I'm not ready to chalk it up as a win right now until I can say confidently 5 months out, Nebraska is better in all 3 phases, and I can't say that right now. There's the pessimist side of things.
They got to be better on offense, dude.
They got to be better on offense. You still have a freshman quarterback. They still haven't shown me through one spring game that the turnover issue has been fixed. I'll wait and see on that one once the season begins. There's still ways for Nebraska to lose football games as the better team. And I think Nebraska's going to be a better team than a lot of teams on their schedule this year, but there's things that can come back and bite them. Freshman quarterback, special teams, two I primarily look at as being issues that could bite Nebraska, where you get to the end of a game and you say, man, how did Nebraska lose that 1-by-1 score?
So we're talking about a football program that has only won more than 7 games once in the last decade. And I'm going to go under and isn't going to change because I think 7-5 would be a successful season. And then you would come at me with, well, who are those 7 teams they beat? And we would break the season into the first 7 and the last 5. But I have to see something before I'm solid. And I would be very, very happy to lose my money this year. But they have to go out. I think last year was a step in the right direction of beating teams that live in your neighborhood. So I think Nebraska is in about the second tier of where the Big Ten is right now, and they're interchangeable with Iowa, Wisconsin. So the teams last year that were in your neighborhood, that were the Purdues and the Northwesterns and the Illinois, you beat them. You didn't beat the Maryland and Michigan State, who also lives on your block, but maybe they live in the poorer portion of the gated community. Because at the way back of the gated community, and I've lived in a gated community, are the really, really nice houses. That's where Michigan and Ohio State and Oregon, they all live. So Nebraska did a good job of beating teams that are kind of similar roster and in terms of roster. If they can do that again, then you can start to, one, Nebraska's got to win home games. before Nebraska can ever move up the ledger, they've got to get back to winning at home. Their home record over the last decade has not been great, and they've got to be able to protect their home field, beat those teams that live in their neighborhood, and then start knocking off teams you're not supposed to beat. So I still think a 7-5 season would be successful. To some, it might be disappointing. I know there's a lot of optimism. I will tell you that internally, these guys think that with competent quarterback play, they are an 8 or 9 win team that when they get towards the middle of November are still going to be in the chatter to go to Indianapolis. That is the internal belief. And you get that from the way that coaches kind of talk about how they're pressing guys, looking for that leadership during the summer. But I think I still sit at 7-5. To me, that would be a successful season. But the thing about the schedule, and I'm not a big win-loss guy, the schedule allows you to keep your head above water then when you're ready. So you go through the schedule. You're not going to just be bludgeoned by 2 straight road games with a bad quarterback play, and all of a sudden you're 0-2. You got a chance to build up some momentum before the schedule really stresses you, and you show up for games, and the guys on the other side of the field are better than you. That's when the coaching kicks in, of in-game coaching. And as you guys know, that's one of my hesitancies right now with Matt Rule's staff before I see it in a attention convention game, that the headsets are better than the helmets.
Okay. Bill, buying or selling or staying away?
Oh, I've got semifinal tickets already purchased for the Huskers. I know where my bread is buttered, but
Bill's gonna get down to the casino.
Look, I was convinced after the Illinois win, and I was right. They just couldn't chase 4, but that they should have gone bowling after the Illinois win, right? That should have happened, and it didn't get done. So as much as, it's fun to talk about the motivation for the Colorado game, I think that they have to have in their mind some of those other losses, games that got away, especially the Iowa game at the end of the season, the Maryland game. They gave away so much last year. They were so close to already being 7-5.
Yep.
Right. And that was despite all the turnovers. And God, they cannot have the same kind of issues turning the football over. I agree with Elijah. That special teams thing is I think a little scary when it comes to, points production. I think the return game is probably going to be better because I think they have better options. That if it's not Barney, then maybe it's Tommy Hill, or maybe it's Ives, or maybe it's, I think, last year it was the depth at return was so bad that they put in a one-legged Billy Kemp to get a fair catch. So they did not. I think that they have options in the return game that could give them competent 10+ returns, for the most part on average in a game. That's a big deal. I think special teams is a really big deal. But look, I think it's an 8-win team. I just am not convinced that everybody else in the schedule, has advanced so far. Rutgers is going to be so much better. Purdue is going to be so much better under a second-year head coach. Indiana with a new head coach. And I know he talks a great game, but in UCLA, a new coach, a new culture, all that to me, that can't be transformative for some of those programs in the way they're structured and the organizations, the way, look, we're close to it because we can see what Matt Rule is doing every day. But I think those that have made changes like Purdue in the last couple of years, it's tough to get traction the way Rule has because of Nebraska's investment in what Rule wants to do and saying we're right there with you. So that's why I think Nebraska's ahead of the game with those other people who are, they're in the gated community, and Nebraska might be amongst those houses where they're still mowing their own yard and they don't have the crew coming in at the cul-de-sac, down the road. But I think Nebraska's ahead in terms of Matt Rule's second year than anybody else.
Well, yeah, one thing I want to add just kind of to piggyback on that, Bill, is you look at the teams that were in the former Big Ten West. I know that doesn't matter anymore, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm a little more hesitant to take that over on the 7.5. But Nebraska's got the highest projected win total. I guess they're technically tied with Iowa. But among the schools that were in the Big Ten West last season, Nebraska's got the highest projected win total. And as you go back year after, I can't remember the last time Nebraska had the highest projected win total in the Big Ten West. Maybe 2019. I'm trying to think the last time that would have happened.
19 was the year they were supposed to win it, according to some folks.
Yeah, so like I look at that, and I think that kind of underscores the build of Matt Rule. Minnesota with PJ Fleck seems to be headed downhill after all the success they had when PJ Fleck started out there. I think row the boat is starting to get a little bit old for Minnesota fans. Iowa is still yet to prove that they have a quarterback. I know they just brought in the transfer, but yeah, that Wisconsin hasn't been too impressive under Coach Fickell in terms of his ability to understand the culture at Wisconsin, what wins at Wisconsin. I'm not out on that experiment by any means, but I think Matt Rule has been the more impressive hire among those two, considering they're kind of tied together, being that they were brought in at the same time to rejuvenate each of their programs. Like, you look across the former Big Ten West, and Nebraska, I think, is the only one that's on the ascent among those schools that used to be there. You could argue maybe Braun at Northwestern, but it's still Northwestern. No offense, Northwestern, but kind of offense, Northwestern. But the problem is that's not the standard Nebraska's held against now. It's not the rest of the Big Ten West. That's not how you make it.
You don't get to play them much anymore.
You make it to a college football playoff by going and taking on Penn State, USC, Oregon, Ohio State, maybe Michigan. We'll see how they look under Coach Moore. Like, that's who Nebraska is going to be compared against now. So it's cool on one hand to be the best of the former Big Ten West, according to Vegas, heading into this season. But that's not your standard anymore. The Big Ten West is now the floor mat for the rest of the Big Ten, and the Big Ten West has to adjust.
Let me ask you this, and I genuinely am curious about Wisconsin, because I think Fickell probably, even though there was questions as to what he was doing offensively with the Badgers, I think that they're probably on par with their football organization, that it matches what Matt Rule is doing in year two. So I think that's a very formidable second-year transitional opponent, much like Nebraska. So I think that's a tough game. But have they had – I know when he first got there was a lot of turnover with their roster and guys who were recruited to a different, especially offense, than what he's implementing. But did they have much turnover in the second year as he got his culture established to where people are saying, all right, we're in? I don't know.
I don't know.
Not really. So I think why their win total is low, they've got a bitch of a schedule. I mean, their schedule is one of the toughest in the country. Out of conference, they get Alabama at home. And then in conference, they play some of the beasts. They don't miss many teams that are at the top of the Big Ten. I think the thing with Wisconsin is recruiting really well skill guys. This goes back to Nebraska as well. Nebraska is going to have some of their better skill talent that they've had for a while. I think they'll have the most wide receiver depth that they've had in 10 years. They, of course, have a quarterback that is a quarterback. But both with Nebraska and Wisconsin it is lacking the amount of all-conference offensive linemen. If you want to boil it down, the problems at the end of the Christ era and last year is give me a Wisconsin offensive lineman that you can rattle off his name. We used to be able to at least give you one because he'd go in the first round or the second round or he'd be all Big Ten. That's something they have to establish at Wisconsin, is getting back to producing all Big Ten offensive linemen. But their skilled players aren't bad, and they're recruiting really well in that era. But I think they got to find some slobber knockers up front, because when Wisconsin's been good, man, it seems like they got 4 offensive linemen that are headed straight to the draft that all look alike, like a walking Coke machine.
See, I just looked up the depth chart. They have some good offensive line names. I guess that's a start for Wisconsin. Like, their offensive line, I'll reel off the names. They sound like Wisconsin offensive linemen. Just some I don't want to say Rust Belt, but upper Midwest, Great Lakes, blue collar guys. You got Jack Nelson, Joe Brunner, Jake Renfro, Joe Huber, and Riley Mallman. Like, you got some offensive line names right there. There's nothing special about those names. You know, those boys are small town Wisconsin boys. Like, that's a start for Wisconsin. I don't know anything else about them besides that they have Big Ten offensive lineman names, but got to start somewhere.
Hey, swing game of the year, if we're talking schedule. So if you're on the fence and you're like, 6-6, 7-5, I could go 8-4, but your swing game would be.
It's UCLA for me. How do you respond after Ohio State? And you could, there's a couple. Rutgers, I think, is better. Okay. I know, but do you get through? Do you stay presumably on the right path, or do you hiccup? Do you hiccup before Ohio State? If you're going to hiccup, who's it going to be against? And probably you could say either Colorado or Rutgers, because Rutgers is going to be better. Maybe in Indiana, but I think UCLA. I think if you're going to hit that over, you're going to need to split in November. And that's either Iowa, Wisconsin, USC, UCLA. Do you split the Cali schools? Do you split the Iowa, Wisconsin 2-for-2? So UCLA is my pick.
To me, it's the popular answer. It's the easy answer, but sometimes you don't got to overthink things. You got to go with Colorado, right? Like, it's game 2 of the season. You have a real chance of being 1-0 going into that game. The good feelings that would persist after a win against Colorado at home in primetime are something that can't be understated, the importance of what that can do for your season because of the run out after that. Mm-hmm. You could be bowl eligible by the time you're playing Ohio State if you can get that Colorado win. Because I think if you beat Colorado, I know there's a lot of vitriol around here about Prime in that roster, but that roster has talent. That roster has first-round draft picks on it. It's not perfect, their roster, but there's still a hell of a lot of talent. And I think as you look at it, the first 6 games of the season, I guess you could add 7 to put Indiana in there. Like, Colorado's the best team on there, on paper.
Sure.
Do they live up to that? I don't know. But based on the talent they have, they're the best team. If you can beat Colorado, you should be the better team up until you go play Ohio State. If you can be bowl eligible by the time you play Ohio State, completely changes the complexion of that run out to the season with Ohio State, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, and Iowa. If you're already bowl eligible and feeling good about yourself, like if you're sitting at 5 wins and Ohio State beats you, it's a lot different than if you're already bowl eligible and Ohio State beats you. So I don't want to overthink things. I got to go with Colorado just in terms of how it changes the next 5 games after that, what those good feelings and what that momentum can do for you to actually have momentum when you play Illinois or Purdue or Indiana. It changes the complexion of those games a little bit whenever those teams don't look at Nebraska and say, that's a winnable game.
All right, before Gary gives us the definitive answer, but I Purdue and Indiana are dangerous. The road games, Purdue does have a second-year coach, could be better, but oftentimes is that the most exciting place to play? And if it can be boring, and the same thing with Indiana, and you find yourself in a trap where there's very little atmosphere, and sometimes that can be at that stage of the season. Indiana, I'm sure that they're going to circle it and say that Nebraska is their measuring stick, right? And then you can't put Nebraska in red on their red calendar. So I could see them trying to drum something up, and maybe they get their emotional win or their emotional performance of the season under, Kurt Cignetti's there now. Mm-hmm. So those are 2 road games where I just wonder if the atmosphere is enough to get you juiced for those games, because it can be kind of tough.
Elijah and Schmidt know this. The Indiana game is the one that I'm really curious about. Like, I think is smack dab in the middle of the season. Nebraska has a chance actually to be bowl eligible before they go to Bloomington. Nebraska could be bowl eligible going into their first bye week. And that would be huge for this program. But then we wouldn't be satisfied, and nobody would be satisfied to say, hey, whoo, we made it. That game could be moved to a Friday night. We don't know. But it's going to be against a coach that I think Indiana made a really, really good hire. Cignetti is, he's going to be a guy, if you're looking at these rankings right now of college football coaches, he's going to be a guy that's going to be in your top 45. I mean, he was 119-35 in his career with 4 conference titles at his 3 different stops. He had James Madison in the top 25 the last 2 years, so he can build a program, and they are letting him build. And so he'll have a good staff as well. It'll be off of a bye week. It'll be another road game. It'll be, don't look too far ahead, because then comes Ohio State, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Iowa. That's a great part where it falls in the schedule to test this team of, oh, man, pat yourself on the back. You guys got your 6 wins. You're going to a bowl game, and you still have half your season left. How does Nebraska handle success when they get midway through the campaign and they play a team on the road that they're going to be favored to win? Because I think Nebraska will be favored in their first 7 games this year. Is how do they handle coming out of a bye ahead of what is going to be the most talked about part of the schedule on the road in Bloomington? If Nebraska handles business there, that only tells me that this team is heading in the right direction, but this program is giving you a sign that they're heading in the right direction, that they can handle prosperity. And I think that's going to be important to establish in year 2 if you're able to grab some of that success and just continue to build on it. Because I do believe at the end of the day, this program, when Rule gets it to where he wants, it'll be able to stay there. Mm-hmm. I never had that sense that if Scott had that breakthrough and went, oh my gosh, woo, we got bowl eligible, that you were going to stay there and then build on that. I think differently with this staff. So the Indiana game has a lot of intrigue to me.
And one thing I want to add, I think we've mentioned this before. I think it would be a big advantage for Nebraska if that game is played on a Friday night. I think coming off the bye week, it gives you, A, another week of preparation before Ohio State, and B, it adds a little weirdness to it so you don't get lulled into a sense of security with this Indiana team.
More focus.
More focus. It adds a little bit of a primetime element for Indiana, so it's not you're playing in an empty stadium in Bloomington like you might on an 11 a.m. kickoff in Bloomington the following day. Adds a little bit of importance to it, changes up your routine a little bit, keeps you from getting complacent in that game. And then on top of that, it gives you an extra day of preparation before you go play Ohio State. I think it could be a big advantage for Nebraska if that's the game that ends up being on a Friday night. I think we can expect at least one game to be on a Friday night this year for Nebraska. That's been the standard for the Big Ten. If it's that Indiana game, I think it means good things for the Huskers.
It's Elijah Herbel, Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Chris Schmidt, the Average Joe Sports Show. Guys, quickly, how does Nebraska do against Sparty as we tape? Going to be a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. Nebraska, a game back of Illinois in the Big Ten regular season chase before Omaha and the Big Ten baseball tournament. What a response by Nebraska after a real clunker ninth on last Friday, walk-off Saturday, guts when it comes to their pitching performance on Sunday. So Sparty's totally gettable, totally doable. They need a little help this weekend, but I think Nebraska can lock in. I think the comeback against Indiana, that momentum carries into East Lansing as I jinx everybody. And I think Nebraska gets out of there 2-1, probably a tie with the regular season with Illinois.
Can they cancel all 3 games? Can Purdue go to Michigan State and run the tarp crew like the fiasco a couple years ago?
That's hilarious.
And I'm a little bit joking, of course, but it doesn't help Nebraska. Nebraska could sweep the series and it doesn't do anything to them. It can only hurt them in terms of RPI. But I think they win another Big Ten series. And this season to me is a success. Mm-hmm. This season was getting back to the NCAA tournament. They're back to the NCAA tournament. They're a number 2 seed. And on the final weekend, they have a chance to win the regular season. I know they're not hosting. That's down the road. That might be next year. But they went to the NCAA tournament. It was choppy to get there. They were better on the weekend than the midweek. But they're going to play in the NCAA tournament. And this weekend, they'll go on the road, and who knows what could happen. We'll do scoreboard watching, and they could share a regular season title, and we go, whoa, how did that happen? Maybe that's a sign of Nebraska's season or a sign of the Big Ten is,
it's both.
Well, it might be a sign where in all honesty, the Big Ten, the RPI isn't bad, the Big Ten may only get 2 teams in. That's crazy. That's not good.
It's awful.
What I'm looking for this weekend, simply put, is just good feelings with that new, I guess, revamped pitching rotation on your weekend with Brockett on Sunday. Can you get some good feelings? A sweep is a cherry on top. I think that's going to be the mission for Will Bolt. I think that's what he's going to challenge his team to go out there and do against Michigan State. It's a sweepable opponent. That's the kind of momentum you'd like to have going into postseason play. Can you go out there, though, and at least stack 3 good starting pitching performances? Because I think the good feelings that can lead to for Husker Nation headed into postseason and the team itself is more important than actually getting the wins against the opponent themselves. At this point, As Gary said, you're likely into the NCAA tournament. Unless you go out there and lose a series or get swept, I don't think it's going to change your seeding all that much in a potential regional. Can you get some good feelings going into postseason play? Can you get some good feelings that translate, especially among your pitching rotation, into solid postseason performances? That's what I'm looking for this week. And can you just get some momentum moving in the right direction before you start a postseason run?
I'm going back to what Gary said about playing with prosperity in football. I'm taking that to baseball. This is one of the first times that this baseball team in the past almost 2 months now is going into a weekend with positive momentum and not having had just a god-awful spring training loss-like performance midweek where there was a lot of what the hell is going on? How are you losing you're winning Big Ten series. You're playing well on the weekend. You've got yourself in position to potentially win a conference title. All right, we got the momentum. And then Tuesday, Wednesday roll around and you lose to Creighton. You lose to South Dakota State. You lose to Creighton again. You lose. And it's just, now granted, you had the no-hitter against Kansas State, and that's fantastic. But there were so many bad performances midweek that was the dark cloud that they were carrying into a weekend. And so now there's not that dark cloud. You won the last two against Indiana. You come back after a disappointing loss on Friday. Christo gave you one of the best pitching performances, in my opinion, in relief of the season to help you get that series win. And now you just go take care of business at Michigan State. There's no midweek questioning. There's no midweek dark cloud. Can you handle the prosperity of the last two games, a thrilling walk-off and a dramatic win? You get some momentum and you go into the Big Ten tournament, solidifying. You're right. They're probably going to be a 2 seed regardless of what happens. It's just going to be a matter of where they get sent. But this has been one of the strangest Nebraska baseball seasons that I can remember. The beginning was so promising with those one-run wins and great play on the road, the Charleston, all that stuff, Grand Canyon, the little feisty games down there. But to me, the midweek follies have been, unfortunately, a theme that has carried through this team for the last 2 months. And they've been able to get rid of that this week and just go play baseball at Michigan State. I think that's a bonus.
It's Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We'll talk to you next time. The Average Joe Sports Show. Find and like us on YouTube, The Average Joe Sports Show. Like and subscribe there. The AJ Sports Pod is where you can go on Twitter, Spotify, and iTunes. Download the audio version and the AJ Sports Show at gmail.com. You want to be a friend of the Average Joe Sports Show. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for tuning in.